Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of technology and its impact on businesses every day of the year. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Professor Stijn Viaene from the Vlerick Business School in Belgium. And he's a renowned expert in the field of digital transformation and has extensive experience advising organisations on how to leverage technology for greater success. So in this episode today, I want to discuss the crucial role of digital infrastructure in modern businesses and the importance of breaking down silos for effective collaboration, and also the debate around whether every company at its core is a technology company. It's a saying that I'm hearing more and more, and many businesses say, hey, we're not a tech company, whereas others will say, actually you are. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this at the end of the podcast too. I will also dive a little bit deeper into the intricacies of digital transformation, because today's guest is going to share his insights on the 4 essential leadership styles that can drive success in today's digital landscape. I will also talk about how the importance of digital transformation being purpose-driven, and learn how technology can complement human skills rather than compete with them. But I don't want to reveal any spoilers, so buckle up and hold on tight, because it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to Belgium, where today's guest is waiting to talk with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, for inviting me. So my name is Stijn Viaene. I'm a professor at Vlerick Business School in Belgium. And I'm a full professor at the University of Leuven, where I do stuff around information systems management.
Fantastic. And there's so much I'm looking forward to talking with you about today. And in light of the belief that every modern company is now a tech company, can you explain the role of digital infrastructure and the role it plays in the success of a business, and also how being agile and responsive can contribute to that success?
Well, the statement that every modern company is a tech company is an interesting one. I guess that for most of the listeners in your podcast, that would be like the most normal thing to say. But I can assure you, when I use that statement and I throw it in an executive team meeting and I ask whether everyone would agree, in most of the cases, I would get a big discussion and quite some disagreement there. With people saying, yeah, but we're not a tech company. I think we're more of a people company, or we're not like this or that startup. We're not a big tech company. So there's a lot of discussion about whether you should be or ought to be a tech company. But I love the question and I love the statement. Why? Because it's the most natural discussion starter when you're initiating a discussion on digital transformation. So that's why I like the statement. Now, given the fact that that statement would lead to a lot of discussion, it's also a good intro to trying to sketch out what technology means to modern day companies and where we've been with the technology. So you also asked about the role of digital infrastructure and how it plays its part in transforming businesses. Well, we've got a whole history of using technology to promote productivity in organizations, and it goes way back. There's several decades of documented productivity increases, and it started in let's say the 70s and the 80s with using technology for automating individual activities in organizations. And in the 90s, when global connectivity was at work with the introduction of the internet, the web, etc., we started talking about connecting these activities and then moving into the space of business process management. Processes and supply chains became the dominant lens to look at technology. And today, I think the role of digital infrastructures is that they're conceived as platforms. So well-architected, component-based sets of digital assets that you can exchange between companies and that you can play with to recombine into almost anything that the creative mind is able to think of. So I do think we've got a whole evolution when it comes to the role of digital technologies in companies, but today it's yet another wave of new things coming our way.
100%. And I've seen so many changes over the years. I mean, traditionally, I was from an IT background, and in the world of IT, they controlled all the technology. They were the guardians of the network, controlled what came in and what came out. And only last week, I was at the Click World conference in Vegas, and there was a big talking point around the importance of data analytics and the technology behind this. And of course, big marketing teams now, they don't need IT. They go straight to the technology providers and work with them. So it is interesting, this whole debate around every company being a tech company. And I'm curious, from the discussions you have, what's the outcome of that? Do they eventually think, oh, actually, we are, but we didn't realize it? Or is there still a little bit of denial there?
Well, so the thing I often do is, out of that discussion comes then the need for defining something like digital transformation. Yeah. And I tend to make 3 points when we have that discussion. Number one, even though we call the transformation a digital transformation, it first and foremost will be a business transformation. But then again, digital technology will play a dominant role, and probably more dominant than in the past. And there are changes, like we shouldn't assume, for example, as you said, that the IT department would take the lead. There's other people claiming the lead in this universe. But in essence, I think what we should avoid here is that there's going to be like this trench war between several parties trying to put their hands on some new resources and trying to become the new heroes in organizations. I think when it comes to really pulling value out of digital transformation, you need to look across the silos, and you need to make the teams realize that only by collaborating and giving one another room in what you used to claim as your own space is only then you will actually start to pull real value out of a digital transformation. So anything that is cross-siloed is a good thing in the world of digital transformation.
And a few years ago, I think every business was chasing that digital transformation. It was a bit of a buzzword, but I think now many businesses are waking up to the fact that it is much more of a journey than a destination. It's not something you just tick off your list and then move on to the next thing. Are businesses realizing that from the conversations you're having?
Well, that's interesting. I see companies that truly realize that, and the question like, seen that, done that, what's next? It isn't really popping up that much anymore, but in other cases, there's companies that haven't seen the light, I would say, and they're asking me what's the next big thing. Of course, as you said, this is a long-term journey that not least will change or require a change in the culture of companies. And you can't just see digital transformation as an event or as an punctuated intervention. No, it's a long-term journey. So some companies see it, some companies don't. And I work with a lot of companies that don't see it. So my job is making sure that they might see the light, they're inspired, and that they also get some framework to work around the idea that this is really a changing world out there.
And I think one thing that everyone will be able to agree with, they might not be able to agree if they're a tech company or not, but they will be able to agree on that a successful digital transformation is ultimately a team effort, and it's going to require a certain amount of culture change within an organization. So on that side of things, how can businesses encourage a more collaborative approach between employees and technology and begin overcoming the strains and foster dare I say, a more harmonious work environment? I know it sounds like a utopia, but it is possible, isn't it?
Well, I think that contrary to the first statement that every company would be a tech company, I think saying that a digital transformation needs a collaboration across all potential silos is almost a non-statement to many people. The key question is, why is it still so difficult then? And I think it has to do with us not being organized as organizations for a turbulent world. We've created silos, we've organized around functional specialization in the past, and that prevents us from crossing the boundaries that have defined what we currently think of as organizations. So what you see in, for example, agile methodologies that try to counter these silo-based organizational designs with more fluid designs is that they put way more weight on just jumping over boundaries that you might have installed in the past and creating cross-functional teams, diverse and and creative sets of people that define themselves, where they're going, how they will get organized, and then how they will connect to other teams that work in pretty much the same way. So I do think that collaboration is something important, but many companies don't understand, I think, what the nature of the collaboration then needs to be. Does it need to be like train station collaboration, where you finish your job and then end up in a train station, hand over something to the next team, and then the next team gets going with it? I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's more of a team-based, network-based kind of a collaboration that we need, where we should be allowed, no matter what our functional designation or role, we should be allowed to enter spaces that we normally, according to our functional designation or role in the organization, or maybe role in the hierarchy, would never have entered before. So that's a totally different kind of collaboration than we have established in the past.
And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today was when you set off my tech radar and tech spidey sensors, when I read that you've identified 4 types of leadership that is actually essential for a successful digital transformation. Let's call them the 4 Vs: vigilant, voyager, visionary, and vested. Can you elaborate on the importance of each of these leadership styles and maybe share a few practical examples of how leaders can drive a successful digital transformation with an organization by using these 4 types of leadership?
Yes, of course. So we started basically by positioning our research, because the 4B model, as you describe it, is the result of a lot of research over many years of working with companies that try to make digital transformation into a success. So what we did was we carefully positioned our research in the middle of 3 convoluted topics, if you want. Digital transformation, which essentially is a mindset that says there's so many technology opportunities out there, let's use them to reinvent business, to create really new growth opportunities. And then there's the question, but what does success then look like? Well, I tend to define it with a second notion, the notion of organizational agility, which would be the capacity of an organization to routinely explore and exploit opportunities faster than their rivals. And it's not going to happen by itself. So you would need people, you would want to be leaders to actually lead that. So we position our research in the midst of these 3 notions: digital transformation, organizational agility, and leadership. Now, leadership in a world that is turbulent needs to be collaborative, needs to be bold but humble, because there's nobody out there that basically has a crystal ball to predict anything. So you constantly need to be open and responsive to what might come out. But then we said, okay, if leadership is something that is distributed, if leadership is something that is humble yet bold, if leadership is collaborative, then how do we see it? How does it manifest itself in ways of working? So we started going into companies, research partners, companies we were training with, and we started looking for ways of working, new ways of working that these companies introduced in the middle of that triangle. So aspiring a digital transformation with the success defined as, is this something that would bring organizational agility? And then people taking up the glove to introduce new ways of working, which we then named leaders. We started looking at all these companies introducing new ways of working. So we long listed ways of working, and we clustered them. We ultimately ended up with clustering in 4, let's say, buckets. And the first bucket would be the first B, would be all kinds of ways of working that people introduce that want to guide their company effectively into the future, that are focused on creating clarity, by looking outside, creating clarity into a turbulent world. What is happening? What are opportunities? What are threats? What does technology mean for me? How can we learn from what is happening outside of the regular space of our current focus? And then by seeing clear into that turbulence, how can we then translate that back into what that would mean to us? That's the vigilant type of leadership. So that type of leader introduces new ways of working by creating clarity into a turbulent world and pulling it in towards creating some meaningful, let's say, map of what is out there. A second type of leader would then take this as an input and say, okay, these are all nice ideas. These are all elements of a potential new business solution or a new organization. But is there a way, are there new ways of working we can introduce to take these ideas and put them into practice, create something concrete very fast and learn from it, iteratively learn from it? Well, that would be the role of the voyager leaders. They assemble creative, smaller type of teams that are diverse and that entrepreneurially go towards finding solutions to often wicked problems and interesting new ideas that they find out there. That would be associated, for example, to make it very, very clear, with introducing things like lean startup methodologies or design thinking in organizations. But that's two V's, two leadership types that play their part, I would say, on the explore side of reinventing your business. Now, of course, exploration is nice, but many people I work with often end up saying, yeah, that's nice, that's playing around in the sandbox, but nothing of this really scales. So how do you truly create productive new businesses out of all these ideas, out of that scanning activity, etc.? Well, there's two other V's, two other leadership types that then come into play. And remember, they are clusters of activities that are introduced into newly created organizations. So the one is a visionary leadership type that basically would set the focus, create a vision around what digital might mean in terms of winning in the turbulent world, but also brings in purpose that goes beyond what would be beneficial for the company itself, but could be beneficial for the world outside that company. It's also a type of leadership that would push the envelope of not doing everything yourself, but working in partnerships, creating an ecosystem perspective on digital business transformation. And then there's a fourth cluster of activities that we associate with a leadership type called a vested leader. And this is the type of leadership that is in very short supply in many companies. It's these types of leaders that can put the whole thing on one roadmap to transformation. It's you often see people that put bits and pieces on a roadmap or plan it into the future, but it's way more important to make sure that all the bits and pieces kind of fit, that all these bits and pieces by themselves are very mobile and flexible, but also click together in a really nice way. And that people that actually work on all these bits and pieces in this new machinery, if you want, that you want to create for the future, that they also find their place in that universe. So there's a lot of people issues, change issues also involved with that vested leadership role. I hope that created some clarity, Neil, into what we've been doing for our research and how we came up with the 4V model.
It really does. And of course, with the rise of generative AI and automation, making many worried about how technology might be replacing them in the workplace. And there are so many examples of businesses focusing on shiny new tech first, rather than starting with the problem, rather than starting with what value are we going to deliver to the business. So my question is, on behalf of every business leader, is how can they better ensure their digital transformation efforts are more purpose-driven, and what role does that relationship between humans and technology play in creating meaningful change and ultimately ensure technology complements human skills rather than competing with them?
Well, in the question, I would say you partially answer the question. Yeah. So I think many of the pitfalls are very well known when discussing digital transformation. For example, there's still too many companies that look at digital transformation as an IT transformation. It should be looked at as a business transformation. So that indeed, as you say, the key question is which new growth, which benefits will we pull out if we invest in new technologies? If that answer is not clear, stay away from investing in the technology. You're not investing in technology for the sake of technology. And number two, there's a lot of companies that have these lofty objectives, that have massive slide decks explaining what their digital transformation strategy would be. But if you then look at how they're allocating resources, then the difference couldn't be bigger. So if your lofty objectives do not correspond to the resource allocation strategy, you've got another problem. And then one problem I think that distinguishes digital transformation as a challenge from digital innovation, where we would be more in the entrepreneurial space, is that when you're trying to do a transformation, you already have an existing organization. You already have something that in many cases isn't doing that. And the question is, how can you focus on exploiting what you already have today with technology, making it better, cutting out the fats and only keeping the muscle, for example, and at the same time invest in what potentially might be your next competitor, so that there might be some intrinsic paradoxes in there, some intrinsic tensions that you would need to handle, that basically revolve around the on the one hand investing in exploiting the past, and on the other hand in exploring the future. And then last but not least, there's a war for talent out there. There's a lot of companies that basically are suffering because they don't find the skills they say that they need. And we're talking about different types of skills. There's hyper specialized technology skills and technology skills. That's a space that is moving at the speed of light, if you want. But there's also skills that are less technology oriented, like design thinking skills. I know banks, for example, that have introduced the rule or the working principle of always having, for example, a core psychologist in front-end development teams, which is interesting because they believe that with experience being the true value you can create with digital technologies, you need more than just tech skills. So there's a whole new relationship, as you said, between people and technology that is being crafted, where on the one hand, we're identifying skills that we never associated with getting value out of technology because they are hardly technology skills. But of course, there's also this challenge that sits on the relationship between business and people and technology, where you see technology take over from human beings. And up to a few years ago, there were a lot of people saying, yeah, but technology, it will never replace the creativity, the intimacy, the empathy showcased by human beings in engaging with one another. Well, unfortunately, if you now look at the chat GPTs, the mid-journeys, etc., generative AI, it comes pretty close to fooling you when it comes to discussing with a technology, and you might not even know it. So there's a lot of hypotheses, assumptions about what technology can do and what humans should be doing that are being pivoted with the introduction of new technology. Now, all of that, what does it actually lead to? I would give companies one advice. That is, and it's an advice that is composed of two parts. One, it is not the case that more technology is always better. That's for sure. We've seen that. But on the other hand, you should constantly experiment with new technologies to see whether they can produce something that's better. So it's a bit of a paradox. On the one hand, I'm saying don't just jump onto the bandwagon of every new technology, but do invest in every new technology and experiment to see what's in and what might not be possible with that technology. And that's going to be a very temporal assessment.
And I'm curious, from all the conversations that you've had with leaders, what are some of the big common pitfalls or challenges that you've seen companies face when undergoing a digital transformation? And the bigger question is, of course, how do they overcome these obstacles to achieve success?
Yeah, well, there's many obstacles, and many obstacles are purely transformational obstacles that you would have found in other business transformations. I think there's three really fundamental things that you see more with digital transformations than with previous business transformations. And number one is, if you look at technology, there's really a need to be forward-looking. There's a lot of stuff that is going to come our way. There's a lot of companies that are good at planning, but they're not good at visioning. They're not good at trying to picture all these types of new futures that some of them might not even be very credible, but they could happen. So being really forward-looking, trying to work in scenarios, thinking about your role in different scenarios, where the world might be going, is one thing we should be getting better at. The other thing that is still haunting us, and it's more of a thing that haunts us in the top of modern organizations, or at the top, that is in executive teams. I do think we're still lacking some digital savvy and some digital literacy in the top of, or at the top of, many organizations. And last but not least, I think framing the success of a digital transformation as ultimately about organizational agility, creating a new capacity to routinely explore and exploit opportunities faster than your rivals, is also something that we should be emphasizing a bit more. And beyond that, there's a lot of pitfalls that you could think of if you've ever been in contact with the digital transformation. But these would be like the three dominant ones, the root causes, I would say, of many issues in organizations.
We've talked about a lot of the obstacles and challenges, but if we get to the other side, are there any success stories that you've come across, companies that have undergone a successful digital transformation and the kind of lessons that they've learned from their experiences? Are there any examples you can share?
Well, the nice thing is I've worked with some of these companies, and the first thing I would say, be very careful in defining success. I always go back to let's look at the timeline. When did you start? What have you introduced? Did it actually produce evidence that created a new organization, more agile than before? And then were you able to capture new growth areas with digital technologies? And in many spaces, there are frontrunners or trailblazers. Internationally in banking, I would say that there's DBS Bank that's operating out of Asia. But there's also more local examples in European mainland. KBC is one of the banks I've worked with. In farming, there's also trailblazers like John Deere. If you look at cities trying to create smart city environments, the city of London is definitely trailblazing when it comes down to open data strategies. Engineering and design, Arcadis. I've been privileged to actually work with Arcadis on their digital transformation strategy. And there's big four companies like Deloitte and KPMG Consulting trying to reinvent them. And none of these companies is there yet. They have realized that if there's one common trait in creating success with digital transformation, is that it needs to become a routine to transform. And the way of working becomes the routine transformation. So there's a lot of examples of companies out there that showcase success with introducing products, new services in the market, trying to open the scope of their traditional enterprise into new value spaces. But ultimately, you have to open the hood of companies and see whether they've truly introduced new ways of working with technology to become this organizationally agile company, to really figure out whether there are success stories or not.
And we've already mentioned generative AI. And for me, around that, the bigger talking point is just 6 months ago, most business leaders had not even heard of it. And now it's threatening to change everything. So as technology continues to advance at a rapid pace, how can businesses better stay ahead of the curve and continuously adapt to new innovations and disruptions in their industries?
Yeah, so I could go back to my leadership model. What should basically do is define leadership, at least partially, in terms of keeping these things, what's happening out there. And every year there's going to be new technologies entering the scene. Keeping this on the radar. Trying to make sense of that. Like, how does generative AI, how does that relate to what we used to call advanced analytics? And before that, business intelligence. If you have a look at the history of how things have progressively evolved, and sometimes it's radically evolved, you're more able to make sense of what is coming your way. You're also able to predict, at least to a certain degree, what is going to come your way. And then it's up to every company to pick up these technologies and somehow try to experiment with them, make them real. Don't just stick to reading magazines or the Harvard Business Review once in a while, because you're just scratching the surface. Many of what you hear and read is also marketing speak. Yeah. So if you really want to get into what the new technology is, the benefits, whether it's a hype, and every new technology, of course, enters the hype cycle. But if you really want to limit the travel disillusionment, if you want, after having lived through the hype, truly understanding a new technology is about getting your hands dirty and trying to experiment with it. So that's what I would say. And I've been in the space of artificial intelligence like for more than 25 years. I started out as a PhD researcher in the 90s with getting my hands dirty with neural networks, support vector machines and the like, with detecting insurance frauds in what we then called big databases. They were very small if you compare it to current day standards. But the moment you get your hands dirty with the technology, you even program some of the technology, you truly know how they operate. Yeah. You also know how they can fool people in thinking that we're truly offering intelligence. But there's a lot of pitfalls in talking about a technology that you haven't experienced yourself.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. And before I let you go, you've shared your insights. I'm going to ask you to leave a few other things for everyone listening. And to begin with, I'm going to ask you if there's a song that means something to you, helps you get your head in the zone, or just a song that you love that we can add to our Spotify playlist for everyone listening. All I'm going to ask is, what song are you going to leave us with and why?
Yeah, so there is a song by Leonard Cohen called Ring the Bells. And it's actually an ode to imperfection. I think if there's one thing I've learned, even though there's always these claims of technology being the newest silver bullet, or the myth that everything will be solved with a new technology, I think there's a crack in everything. And if you look at the crack as a way to let the light in, then you're going to be home free. So that would be my song. And there's other songs, of course. If you look at the technology landscape, you can also get very, very nervous and think you need some Valium or something. Could resonate with a song like "Welcome to the Jungle" by Guns N' Roses. But okay, let's stick with the song "Ring the Bells" by Leonard Cohen.
Oh wow! Well, as a big Leonard Cohen fan, absolutely love that. Great choice. And I love that line about the cracks are where the light gets in. Absolutely love it. And one other thing I'm going to ask you, we've talked about a lot of serious matters today, and yeah, one of the things we don't talk about is the amount of fun we have throughout our career, especially in the tech world. So can you share the funniest or most interesting story that has happened in your career?
Well, I don't know whether it's the funniest or the most interesting, but technology might get you into places that are completely unexpected. I once ended up with a lingerie company asking me to do a keynote on digital transformation, and I stepped onto the podium and I noticed that there were like two very big posters of almost nude ladies at both sides of me. And I really was wondering at the end whether people paid attention to my keynote. But ultimately, I think they did. But it was like one of the most interesting gigs I've ever done.
Oh, absolutely love it. And for anyone listening wanting to carry on this conversation we started today, maybe they want to contact you or your team or just find out more information about your work, what's the best place to find you online and contact your team?
You can send me an email or you can link with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, we've covered so many big topics today around that arguable statement of, is every company a tech company? Successful digital transformation, how it comes from being supported by everyone in the business, and something we could just talk about for so much longer. So I'd love to stay in touch with you, maybe get you on later in the year and continue this conversation. But you also have time to leave us with a great song too. In fact, I'm going to listen to that as soon as we finish here. But thanks for joining me today.
It was a pleasure.
And there you have it, gang. What an incredible conversation with Professor Stijn Viaene there on digital transformation, the essential leadership styles needed to navigate today's rapidly evolving business landscape. And there were so many big takeaways there, from digital transformation being a team effort and why it's vital to create a healthy relationship between people and technology, ultimately by fostering collaboration and breaking down silos. Only then can businesses drive innovation and stay ahead of the curve. And also, it's important to remember those 4 leadership styles, of course: vigilant, voyager, visionary, and vested, and never lose sight of the fact that digital transformation needs to be purpose-driven and complementary to human skills. That is the key to long-term success, and only by aligning objectives with resource allocation and striking a balance between exploiting the past and exploring the future, only there can businesses thrive in a digital age. But I'd love to hear more about how you're overcoming the challenges and pitfalls of digital transformation. And I hope today's conversation has gone a long way to just inspiring you to dive into that subject a little bit deeper. Reflect on your own business's digital transformational journey and how you can cultivate the leadership styles necessary for success. But maybe you've already got a few good ideas. I'd love to hear more of them. I want to hear more of your experiences. You've just heard me and today's guest having a little conversation now, but I want to bring you into it. So keep those messages coming over to me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. And remember, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Neil C. Hughes. But thanks for joining me today on Tech Talks Daily. Big thank you to today's guest for sharing his expertise and insights with us. And until next time, don't be a stranger.